Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I would like to address a new term and a new concept called the Transformative Museum. I think it's probably true for all sectors that they should be ready to embrace change, to have a transformative mindset. And this can definitely also be said about museums and heritage institutions. I would like to go through a few theories about this concept and what it actually means for especially museums and heritage sites to have a more transformative mindset and mentality, and how change and transformation can best be embraced within the sector. As always, if you like the content of these videos, please like them, subscribe to the channel and add your comments. It's always lovely to hear from you. Now, we talked a little bit about change and transformation in a previous video, and I'll link to that in the description below. But I would like to take it a little bit further today and talk about transformation, especially in terms of the museum or in terms of the heritage sector as a whole. First of all, let's just start by defining what is the difference really between change and between transformation. If we look at a completely simple dictionary definition, change is to make or become different. Transformation is a complete change in the appearance or character of something or someone, especially so that that thing or person is improved. Now you can tell the difference here, where transformation is sort of taking it a bit further. You have a complete change in appearance or character of a person or of a thing, of a concept, and especially, and that's interesting, in order to improve it. Now this means that transformation has to be seen really as a process. It's never something that's fixed or firm. It's never something that remains the same throughout any kind of development. Now, within a museum or a heritage setting, this is due to the fact that museum and heritage sites are constantly working with the concept of understandings and of meaning making and of creating relevance around their collections, their storytelling, their themes, their heritage site, their architecture, whatever it is they're working on or whatever it is their focus point is. They're constantly searching to create understanding and meaning, and to involve, maybe even get visitors to participate in this particular process. Now, throughout history, there have been different ways of defining understanding and different ways of thinking about it, different mentalities and mindsets, if you like. And I would like to try and go through a few terms that have been used to define meaning making and understanding in three different historical periods: the modern, the postmodern, and then I would like to add a transformative or a transformation approach as well, just to see and try to define how things are actually developing within some key terms. Now, first of all, if we look at a key term for modernism and for the modern way of thinking, it was this instructive way of learning and educating. Now, this goes back to a time where there was a strong national focus. We were defining the first collections in terms of what we knew within our own national border. That also meant looking at things chronologically. We can go back to, I know in Denmark, for example, the first definitions of the Stone Age, the Bronze Age and the Iron Age came in 1836 and was defined by Christian Jørgensen Thomsen. And that way of looking at prehistory from a chronological perspective and also a national perspective really added to that instructive way of learning. It also meant that you actually tried to look at things in an objective way by defining certain periods, for example, of history or prehistory. Of course, you weren't objective, but you were trying to really embrace that objective mindset. Now, in a postmodern vision, it becomes much more about visitor interaction. So the instructive learning style has been, we are actually moving deliberately away from it now, and you are focusing much more on interactive and communicating with visitors. That also meant that you started to really interpret and display your collection for a global audience. So you began to gain a global focus in what you did. It also meant that instead of looking at things chronologically, you looked at the various individual stories. For example, the story of a certain object, or of a certain a historical person, or of a certain historical period. That meant, of course, there was certain subjectivity added to this approach. And that was really okay, as long as you were aware of that was what you were doing. Now, if we stepped into a transformative way of looking at things, we are now really adding visitor influence to the visitor experience. The visitors themselves are not just interacting with our stories and our collections, they are influencing it directly. So the visitor experience and the interpretation experience depend on the visitors' interaction and their approach and what they bring as well. This also means that we can actually add another layer to the global focus, which is now becoming worldwide, not just in terms of technology, of course, or digital interpretation and storytelling, but also in terms of the different worlds or spheres we are entering. You can mix natural history, art history, archaeology, whatever you like, in a storytelling approach. So the participation, again, with the visitor influence in mind, becomes a really strong focus. And your way of doing this can be objective, it can be subjective. It's much more flexible than ever really seen before. Now, this is of course also very linked to innovation and to an innovative mindset, and a way of combining transformation with innovation from all sectors, really. So it's hard to keep talking about the museum or heritage sector because it's linked and it overlaps with so many different sectors, and that's really part of the innovation and of the development. I remember I came across this innovative model created by Leicester, which is an innovation foundation, and they looked at it as a spiral, really. It's called the Nautilus Model because of this spiral shape. And they saw the different phases within this spiral shape, where you have in the middle, you have a closed system, really, with a very specific frame that you can't really push in any direction. You have a closed social system, for example, a museum organization. However, when a challenge, perhaps even a problem, occurs, the system has to open up. You have to look at new opportunities and new challenges. And as you're doing that, you're really generating new ideas. You're starting to develop, you're starting to test the new ideas. You are making the case, and you're delivering and implementing as you go along in this innovation model. And as you come further and further away from the center, really, of the spiral, you start growing and scaling, and you also eventually start to change and influence other systems in a positive direction. And that's really the core idea of this innovation spiral, that you eventually start to grow and scale and impact other systems as well, and therefore other sectors, other ways of thinking, other mentalities, and other approaches as well. Now, I've tried to adapt this model into the museum and heritage sector for now in a very simple way, and please forgive that this is looking less professional than the model you've just seen. It's an attempt to try and use this model and this innovative approach and way of thinking in a transformative museum and heritage mindset and mentality, really. But essentially, the principle of it is the same. So you have at the center, you have a closed self-referencing system that's really just circling around itself. It's not a system that is in any way thinking in an innovative, transformative way. It's not embracing new changes or challenges. However, that can change whenever the system comes across a disturbance or a challenge, and you are sometimes forced really to open up at this stage. You can do it either reluctantly, or you can try and embrace it. That's really up to you and the mindset of your organization. What happens then is of course that you start to explore the new opportunities. Okay, we have come across a disturbance here or a challenge. What do we do about it? How do we explore this new problem, if it is a problem or challenge, and how can we address it? Slowly then, you have to open up and start pushing the frames a little bit, no matter how firm they might be. And you have to start generating new ideas and cooperate with partners, users, your audiences, your local community, perhaps national and international partners as well. That means you also start to develop and experiment with new approaches of doing things, because you gain new inferences. You're literally cooperating with people who have different approaches, different mindsets, and you're cooperating with different social systems as well. Now, as you start to deliver and implement these new approaches, it does mean inevitably that there will be a growth, there will be scaling and spreading these new experiences. Maybe not deliberately yet, it can just be something that happens within your social structure, organization, and that of and those of your partners. But it will create new approaches and ways of thinking that may be implemented and observed by other social systems and organizations. Now, finally, at the end of this Nautilus spiral, you get to a point where you actually start to impact other systems and other sectors and organizations, because there is a completely new understanding and a mindset implementing, and that might actually be something that in itself has created a new transformation, a new way of approaching your own area of work and your own focus point, but it will also generate new terms, new ideas. Now, in sociology, there are lots of theories around social system change. One I have found really useful is the German sociologist Niklas Luhmann, who talks a lot about social systems, but there are many, many others. And if you are interested, do have a look at some of these, because they can be really interesting in terms of museum and heritage sites and historical interpretation as well to have a look at. Now, I realize this is quite theory heavy, but I think there is a point to it when it comes to looking at the development of the sector as a whole, as well as individual heritage and museum organizations. And I think essentially it comes down to looking at what it is the museums, the heritage sector really is meant to be doing. And during an interview I did with Dr. Donald Smith at the Scottish Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh, I think he touched upon this very core of the entire museum and heritage sector, and what it actually is that they exist for and they are meant to be doing. He said, in the cultural, political, economical world we are in, museums are centers of cultural understanding, and people are communicating cultural understanding across boundaries, race and religion, which is so important. And he continued, he said, sometimes the most basic things are the most obvious and the ones we forget to articulate. Somehow bizarrely becoming a smaller world sometimes seem to be leading to more prejudice and competition and rivalry and stereotyping of other cultures. That is odd, isn't it? So what is the role of museums in connection with that to address it all? And I think at a very basic level, that is precisely what museums are for. However, we can't really start to address all these things unless we are willing to embrace transformation and change as well, and in a way also innovation, because the world doesn't stand still. It is in constant change. Our belief systems, our way of thinking, our mentality, it's all constantly being challenged and changed and pushed in all directions. And I think especially we feel this when we are in a crisis situation, or when we are being challenged, and when our principles fundamentally are being challenged. That's really when we have to embrace a transformative way of thinking, more than ever, and more than anything else. How museums are going about that, and if they have really found a way of doing that, is another matter. But it's going to be interesting to see how we are going to do interpretation and storytelling in 5, 10 years, 20 years time, and how museums can really embrace the entire idea, the mindset, the mentality of transformation. Let me know your thoughts on this. It's always lovely to hear from you.